They never told the families where the bodies went. In the dead of winter, under a pale moon that refused to look down, men in white coats would wheel the dead through a tunnel 500 feet long, carved deep beneath the frozen earth. One body, then another, then another. By morning, the tunnel would be empty again. But the smell, God, the smell, it never left. They say if you stand at the mouth of that tunnel today, in the ruins of what was once called a place of healing, you can still hear the wheels, scraping, echoing, coming closer. This is the story they tried to bury. A hospital built on hope that became a tomb, a tunnel that swallowed 10,000 souls in silence, and a secret so dark it took a century to claw its way back into the light. What you're about to hear is real, every word of it, and it will change the way you think about the buildings we abandon, the people we forget, and the lies we tell ourselves about mercy. Because mercy wasn't what happened here, not even close. There was a place, hidden in the hills, where the sick went to die. They called it a sanatorium. They called it salvation. But the people who walked through those iron gates, most of them never walked out. And when they didn't, when their breath stopped rattling in their chests and their eyes finally closed for the last time, the hospital had a problem. You see, death was supposed to be rare. Death was supposed to be preventable. But in this place, death was an epidemic. And the bodies piled up faster than the living could bury them. So they built a tunnel, deep, dark, out of sight. A passage designed not for the living, but for the dead. They called it the body chute, and it ran like a vein beneath the hospital, stretching down the hill, down into the shadows where no one would see, where no one would ask questions. At its peak, they say a body rolled down that tunnel every hour, 24 a day, 7 days a week, for decades. Do the math. That's over 10,000 lives, 10,000 people who came seeking help and left in secret, in silence, through a tunnel the world pretended didn't exist.
The hospital opened in 1910, perched on a hill that overlooked the valley like a stone sentinel. It was designed to house 40 patients suffering from tuberculosis, the White Plague, a disease that rotted lungs from the inside and left its victims coughing blood until there was nothing left to cough. Fresh air, they said, sunlight, rest, that was the cure. And so they built this place with wide porches and open windows, believing nature itself could heal what medicine could not. But tuberculosis didn't care about hope. It spread like wildfire. By the 1920s, the hospital had expanded. New wings, new floors, beds crammed into hallways. Over 400 patients packed into a building meant for 40. The air that was supposed to heal them became thick with infection. The sunlight couldn't reach the overcrowded wards. And the dying? God, the dying never stopped. The staff tried to keep it quiet. They tried to maintain the illusion that this was still a place of healing, that people still walked out cured, that families could still have hope. But hope is hard to sell when you're wheeling corpses past the living every single day. Patients would watch from their beds as the dead were carried out, wrapped in white sheets, their faces covered, their names already forgotten. It destroyed morale. It spread fear faster than the disease. And so the hospital made a decision. If the living couldn't see the dead, maybe they could still believe in survival. Maybe they could still hold on. That's when they started building the tunnel. It took months to carve it out. 525 feet of stone and dirt sloping downward from the morgue at the top of the hill to the bottom where the railroad tracks ran. The official reason was logistics. The hill was steep. The road was treacherous in winter. It was easier, they said, to move bodies underground. But the real reason was shame. Shame that so many were dying.
Shame that the miracle cure was a lie. Shame that the hospital had become not a sanctuary, but a waiting room for death. And so they carved that tunnel deep enough that no one would see. They lined it with brick and dim electric lights that flickered and buzzed like dying insects. They installed a rail system, a mechanical pulley that could transport a gurney from top to bottom without a single human hand touching it. Efficient, silent, out of sight. And it worked. The living stopped seeing the dead. The family stopped asking questions, because as far as they knew, their loved ones were still fighting, still breathing, still hoping for a miracle that would never come. The truth rolled down that tunnel in the dark, one body at a time, and nobody was counting.
The workers who operated the tunnel never spoke about it. Not to their families, not to each other. It was an unspoken rule. You did your job. You kept your head down. You didn't think too hard about the weight of the gurney or the shape beneath the sheet, or the fact that some of these people were children, some were teenagers, some had only been in the hospital for a week. You didn't think about the fact that the tunnel never seemed to stop, that every shift there was another body, and another, and another. One worker, years later, broke his silence in a newspaper interview that was buried in the back pages and forgotten almost immediately. He said the tunnel smelled like formaldehyde and rot, a chemical sweetness that clung to your clothes and your skin no matter how many times you washed. He said the lights barely worked, and sometimes you had to make the journey in near darkness. The only sound, the rhythmic clank of the gurney wheels on the rails. He said he once saw a hand slip out from under the sheet. Just a hand, pale, fingers slightly curled. He didn't stop to tuck it back in. He just kept walking. He said he quit 3 weeks later and never went back. But the tunnel didn't stop. It kept running, kept swallowing, kept erasing people as if they'd never existed at all. At the bottom of the tunnel, the bodies were loaded into unmarked hearses or onto freight trains that carried them to potter's fields, mass graves where the unclaimed and unnamed were buried in trenches, stacked like cordwood and covered with lime. Some were cremated in furnaces that ran day and night, the smoke rising into the sky where it mixed with the clouds and disappeared. There were no headstones, no ceremonies, no one to say a prayer or scatter flowers or remember their names. They became numbers in a ledger that no one bothered to keep. Patient 4012, patient 7638, deceased, disposed of, forgotten. Their families, if they ever asked, were told their loved ones had been buried with dignity, that there had been a service, that the hospital had taken care of everything. It was a lie, a comfortable lie, the kind of lie that lets you sleep at night because the truth is too heavy to carry. And the hospital kept lying, kept burying, kept pretending that the tunnel wasn't there, that the bodies weren't piling up, that everything was under control. But the truth has a way of surfacing, even when you bury it 500 feet underground.
By the 1950s, antibiotics had arrived. Tuberculosis, the disease that had filled the hospital's beds for 40 years, was suddenly curable. The wards began to empty. The tunnel fell silent. And in 1961, the hospital closed its doors. It stood abandoned for decades. The windows shattered. The walls crumbled. Vines crawled through the hallways like veins, reclaiming the building inch by inch. The tunnel, too, was abandoned. The entrance was sealed with chains and rusted metal doors that groaned in the wind. But the stories didn't stop. Locals began to whisper about the place, about the hill, about the tunnel. They said you could hear things at night, Footsteps, the scrape of metal on stone, voices calling out names that no one remembered. They said if you went down there, into the dark, you'd feel a cold hand brush against your shoulder. You'd see shadows move where no shadows should be. And you'd know, deep in your bones, that you weren't alone. The dead, they said, never left. They were still there, waiting in the dark, waiting for someone to remember. In the early 2000s, a group of paranormal investigators gained access to the abandoned hospital. They brought cameras, recording equipment, thermal sensors, all the tools of the trade. They wanted to document the tunnel, to see if the stories were true. They descended into the dark with flashlights cutting through the stale air, their voices echoing off the brick walls. And what they found shook them. The rail system was still there, rusted and broken, but unmistakable. The gurneys were gone, but you could see the grooves in the stone where the wheels had worn the surface smooth. The walls were covered in scratches, deep gouges, as if something or someone had clawed at the brick in desperation. At the bottom of the tunnel, they found remnants, scraps of cloth, pieces of leather straps that had once bound bodies to the gurneys, and bones. Small fragments of bone, half buried in the dirt, too old to identify, but too human to ignore. One investigator later said the tunnel felt alive, that the air was thick, pressing in on them from all sides, that every step forward felt like a step into something that didn't want them there. They recorded hours of footage, strange sounds, unexplained temperature drops, and in one clip, barely visible in the static, a shape moving in the background. Tall, thin, there one moment, gone the next. They left the tunnel and never went back. The footage was uploaded online. It went viral, and suddenly the world knew about the body chute, about the 10,000 dead, about the hospital that had buried its secrets in the dark.
The backlash was immediate. Families who had lost loved ones decades ago demanded answers. Historians began digging through archives, piecing together records that had been deliberately obscured. What they found was damning. The hospital had kept 2 sets of books, one for the public, reporting manageable death rates and hopeful outcomes, one for internal use, documenting the true scale of the dying. At its peak, the hospital recorded an average of 1 death per day. But in the worst years, during the height of the tuberculosis epidemic, the number was closer to 2 or 3, sometimes more. And most of those bodies were never claimed, never identified, never given a proper burial. The hospital's defense was that they were overwhelmed, that they were doing the best they could with limited resources, that the tunnel was a necessity, not a cruelty. But the families didn't see it that way. They saw betrayal. They saw their loved ones treated like waste, like something to be hidden and forgotten. The lawsuits came, the protests came, and the hospital's reputation, already tarnished by decades of abandonment, crumbled completely. The truth was finally out, and it was worse than anyone had imagined. Today, the hospital still stands. It's been partially restored, turned into a museum and a destination for ghost hunters and dark tourism enthusiasts who pay to walk the halls and descend into the tunnel. The owners call it historical preservation. Critics call it exploitation. But the tunnel itself, the body chute, remains exactly as it was. Dark, cold, scarred by the weight of what it carried. They've installed lights now and safety rails and guided tours that explain the history in sanitized terms, but no amount of explanation can erase the feeling, the weight in the air, the sense that something is still there, lingering in the shadows, refusing to move on. Visitors report feeling watched, hearing whispers, feeling a sudden, inexplicable cold that has nothing to do with the temperature, and some refuse to go down at all. They stand at the entrance, looking into the dark, and something deep inside them screams to turn back. Because the tunnel remembers, the walls remember, and the dead, the 10,000 dead who were never given names, never given mourning, never given rest, they remember too.
There's a question that haunts this place, a question no one wants to answer. If this happened here, in one hospital, in one tunnel, how many others are there? How many other tunnels run beneath how many other hospitals, carrying how many other forgotten dead? How many bodies were buried in unmarked graves because it was easier than telling the truth, because it was cheaper than giving them dignity, because no one cared enough to remember their names? The answer is thousands. Across the country, psychiatric hospitals, sanatoriums, and asylums operated for over a century, housing hundreds of thousands of patients. And when they died, many were buried on site in potter's fields, mass graves, and unmarked plots. Some hospitals kept records, most didn't. And the families were told their loved ones were at peace, that they'd been cared for, that everything had been handled properly. It's one of the great erasures in modern history, a systematic forgetting of the vulnerable, the sick, the marginalized, people who were already invisible in life, erased completely in death. And we're only now beginning to remember, only now beginning to ask the questions we should have asked 100 years ago. Who were they? What were their names? And why did we let them disappear into the dark, into a tunnel that swallows everything and gives nothing back? Because that's what happened here. That's what happened to 10,000 people who came to this place hoping to be saved and left without a name, without a grave, without anyone to remember they ever existed. And if we forget them, if we let them stay buried in the dark, then we're no better than the people who put them there. So remember them. Say their names, even if you don't know them. Light a candle, leave a flower. And the next time you pass an old abandoned building, a hospital with shattered windows and crumbling walls, ask yourself, what secrets are buried beneath? What tunnels run below? And who is still waiting in the dark, hoping that someone, anyone, will finally remember?